The clink of crystal, the soft hum of jazz, and the low murmur of deals and anniversaries filled the dining room of Vérité, Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant. Table 12 was a spectacle in itself. Billionaire tech mogul Elliot Vance sat in a tailored midnight blue suit, surrounded by sycophants in tailored suits and evening gowns. His laughter cut through the noise, sharp, performative. Then came the sound no one expected. A soft splash, a small crystal glass tipped just enough for the water to run down the side and onto Elliot's lap. Then his coat, carefully draped over the chair behind him. The waitress froze. She couldn't have been more than 23. Petite, with dark eyes and a quiet composure that made her seem out of place in a room like this. Her hand still hovered over the now empty glass. Elliot looked down slowly. A sharp inhale followed. His face contorted, not in pain but fury. His voice boomed across the polished space. "Do you have any idea what you've just done?" The room went silent. The couple at table 8 stopped mid-toast. A man at the bar lowered his phone. Forks hung in mid-air. Even the music, strangely, seemed to hush. The waitress stood perfectly still. "It's a Bryony," Elliot barked, rising from his seat, swiping at the fabric with a napkin. $5,000. Are you completely useless or just hoping for attention? The restaurant manager, a balding man with trembling hands, rushed toward them. "I deeply apologize, Mr. Vance," he began, already gesturing toward the girl. "She's new. We'll—" But the waitress finally spoke. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. "Did you think I wouldn't recognize my father?" The napkin fell from Elliot's hand. Gasps weren't heard, but they were felt, like a wind moving through the room, lifting eyebrows, tightening throats. Elliot froze. The girl didn't move. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She just stood there, calm, pale, still. The manager's mouth opened, then closed again. A server dropped a tray in the distance, shattering porcelain that no one turned to see. I don't know what you think this is," Elliot said at last, though his voice had lost its edge. It cracked, barely, but it cracked. The girl met his eyes. "You left when I was 2, she said. "You had someone else sign the checks. She kept the letters. I read them all." Elliot's face drained of color. "Please," he snapped at the manager. "Remove her." But the manager didn't move. No one did. The room remained frozen. Waiters, guests, even the bartender, all watching as a man known for controlling rooms, companies, markets, stood defenseless in front of a girl with nothing to lose. The girl turned without another word and walked toward the kitchen. The doors swung shut behind her, and the room exhaled. No one clapped, no one spoke. But something had shifted. The billionaire sat back down, slowly, as if his legs no longer trusted him. Behind him, the glass she had spilled, the one that started it all, sat perfectly intact on the table. Still full. Still standing. The glass didn't break. But something else had. The flashing red and blue lights cut through the restaurant's sleek glass front, bouncing off champagne flutes and silver spoons. Vérité had never hosted a police car. Not until tonight. 2 uniformed officers entered first, followed by a plainclothes detective in a long navy coat, badge clipped to his hip. The maitre d' greeted them with a voice full of rehearsed calm, but his fingers trembled as he pointed toward the private lounge. Elliot Vance was already seated inside, legs crossed, a glass of scotch in hand. His jacket was gone, his face composed. "She made a scene," he said before anyone asked. "She's clearly unstable. I'd like to file a report for harassment." The detective raised an eyebrow. "The waitress?" "Clara Vale, or whatever fake name she gave." Elliot took a slow sip. "She threw water on me and made some delusional claim. I'm a public figure. This kind of thing happens." One of the officers nodded, but the detective didn't move. "We'd like to speak with her, sir." Elliot waved a dismissive hand. "By all means." In the back of the restaurant, the staff hallway smelled faintly of dish soap and burned bread. The young woman was sitting on a bench near the walk-in freezer, apron folded in her lap. She didn't look shaken, just tired. The detective approached her slowly. "Miss?" She looked up. Clara Vale." He nodded. "Detective Monroe." He crouched to her level, voice low. "You caused quite a stir tonight." "I know," she said softly. "He wasn't supposed to be here. I didn't plan it. I just reacted." Monroe tilted his head. "You said he was your father?" Clara met his eyes without flinching. "He left when I was 2. He paid someone to keep us quiet. But I remember the smell of his coat, the sound of his voice. And tonight?" Clara exhaled slowly. "I didn't expect it to matter. I didn't expect anyone to care." Outside the hallway, the restaurant buzz had returned, albeit cautiously. But in this quiet space, time felt suspended. Monroe took out a small notepad. "There's no press, no arrest. I just want to understand. You say Elliot Vance is your father?" Clara nodded. "And he thinks no one remembers." There was no performance in her voice, no tears. Just the steady certainty of someone who had waited years to say the truth out loud. Monroe closed his notebook. "We'll talk again." Clara gave a small nod. "I'll be here." Back in the lounge, Elliot checked his watch. "Well?" Monroe's voice was dry. "She gave a name." Elliot rolled his eyes. "I want her removed." "No charges filed," Monroe said. "She's still an employee." Elliot's jaw tightened. "Then fire her." Monroe paused. "That's not my department." As he left the room, Elliot downed the rest of his drink and stared at the glass. For the first time in years, he couldn't control the narrative. And for the first time, someone had used his name before he could erase theirs. 2 days passed before Clara received the number. It came in a folded note slipped discreetly into her locker at the restaurant. No name, just a number and 2 words. She remembers. Clara dialed it from a payphone, her voice trembling despite her resolve. "Karen Poe?" A pause. Then, "You're her daughter, aren't you?" Karen Poe's office was nothing like Clara expected. No high-rise, no marble, just a converted brownstone in the East Village, lined with dusty books and yellowing files. The lawyer herself looked tired in the way that only time and secrets could cause. Gray streaked her hair, and her eyes were heavy with things unsaid. Clara sat across from her, arms folded tightly. "I want to know the truth," she said. "All of it." Karen studied her. "You look like her, but you speak like him." Clara's jaw tightened. Karen opened a drawer and pulled out a thick file. She placed it between them like a weight. "This was signed 21 years ago," she said. "Your mother was 24. She was working at one of Elliot's early startups. He was married then. You weren't planned." Clara's heart pounded in her ears. "She never told me that." "She wasn't allowed to," Karen replied. "This agreement, it wasn't just money, it was control. There's a clause in here that prohibits your mother from ever contacting him or disclosing your parentage. Violation meant immediate legal retaliation. I advised against signing it. She did it anyway." "Why?" Karen hesitated. "Because she was scared and broke and pregnant. He gave her just enough to disappear." Clara leaned forward. "So I'm a secret." "You're a threat," Karen said flatly. "On paper, you don't exist to him." Clara stared at the file, bile rising in her throat. "How much?" Karen didn't blink. 300,000, paid in quarterly installments, increased when she agreed to list another man as your father on your birth certificate." The room fell silent. Clara closed her eyes. $300,000. That's what she'd been worth. To a man with billions. Karen slid the file across the desk. I kept a copy. I wasn't supposed to. "Can I use it?" Clara asked. Karen shook her head. Legally, no. Morally? She exhaled. That's up to you. Clara stood slowly, tucking the papers under her arm. As she reached the door, Karen spoke again. She told me once that she didn't regret you. Only the silence. Clara didn't turn around. She just stepped outside, into the winter air that suddenly felt sharper than before. She now had proof, but it came wrapped in shame, written in ink, and signed by the hands that chose erasure over responsibility. I always knew not to ask, not because she ever said it, but because I could feel it, humming under the surface like a live wire. My mother worked nights, always nights, supermarket stocker, hotel laundry, bartending at places where women wore black pants and fake smiles. She said the hours were better for her head, but I think it was her heart that couldn't handle the daylight. She used to come home just before dawn. Her keys would jingle softly as she crept through the door. I would pretend to be asleep, but I always listened. The sound of her shoes dropping to the floor, the quiet sigh when she thought no one could hear, the lock on the bathroom turning, and then the water running. I remember those showers more than I remember bedtime stories. When I was 6, I found a photo. It was in the back of her closet, tucked inside a shoebox filled with old receipts and expired coupons. A photo of her, younger, smiling in a stiff blazer, standing beside a tall man in a navy suit. Her eyes looked unsure. His hand rested on her lower back. On the back of the photo was a name. Elliot V.I. asked who he was. She said he was no one, and then she took the photo and burned it in the sink while I stood there watching. When I was 8, a boy at school asked me why I didn't have a dad. I told him I didn't need one. When I was 10, I asked my mother again, just once. She sat down at the table and said, "Some names once spoken can't be forgotten." And then she looked at me with red eyes and said, "Never ask again." So I didn't. But I saw his face on the news, on magazine covers, TED Talks, IPO launches, my textbooks, always smiling, always shaking hands with men in suits, always talking about building the future. I memorized the way his mouth moved when he spoke, how he gestured, how he stood. I saw myself in none of it. But I knew. I kept it locked inside, like she asked, until that night. It was just a normal shift. Section 3, corner tables, 6 covers. My apron was tight, the manager was yelling about turnover speed, and my feet were aching before the rush even started. Then I saw the name on the reservation list. Elliot Vance, party of 6 private booth. No substitutions. I froze. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My fingers hovered over the server station touchscreen, but my mind was already spinning. It wasn't a decision. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't planned. It was pressure, years of it, finally finding a crack. And when the water spilled, and he yelled, and the whole room stopped breathing, I just said it. Did you think I wouldn't recognize my father? Some words don't ask for permission. They arrive fully formed, and once they do, there is no putting them back. The restaurant's security office was small and windowless, a forgotten room between the wine cellar and the staff lockers. Inside, the owner, Martin DeSoto, sat in front of the glowing monitor, thumb pressed against the rewind button. He had already watched the clip 5 times. Table 12. Timestamp, 8:42 p.m. The moment the glass tipped, the spill, the yelling, the sentence. Martin paused the footage right there. Did you think I wouldn't recognize my father? No screaming, no dramatics. Clara's voice was calm, but her eyes, wide, steady, pierced through the screen, like they had pierced through that entire room. Martin leaned back, rubbing his jaw. His phone buzzed on the desk, but he ignored it. He wasn't supposed to keep footage longer than 24 hours unless something was stolen or someone sued. That was policy. But this felt like something else. By morning, the clip had been copied. First, to a flash drive, then quietly uploaded to a locked forum. one used by hospitality workers across the city. It was meant to be shared among colleagues, mostly for venting and warnings, but this one was different. Comments started slowly. Was there that night. This is real. She didn't blink. You can feel the room stop breathing. Within hours, someone pulled the footage and uploaded a blurry copy to a private Discord server. From there, it jumped. Elliot's public relations team was in. Full damage control by lunchtime. Leah Braddock, his lead image consultant, sat in a downtown glass tower, phone glued to her ear as she scrolled Twitter and tried not to panic. Tell him to release a statement, she snapped to her assistant. Say he supports women's rights. Something about mental health, whatever polls better. He's refusing, the assistant replied. Of course he is, Leah muttered. She opened the video again. The resolution wasn't great, but the angle caught everything. Elliot standing, yelling, pointing, the girl unmoving. And that sentence, again and again. There was no violence, but there was truth, and truth didn't need volume. Martin didn't. Speak to reporters. When a blogger emailed asking to confirm the clip's origin, he deleted it. But he didn't delete the footage. He backed it up twice. One copy went into a locked drawer. The other, no one could quite say where it went next. By the end of the day, a slowed-down, subtitled version of the video appeared on Reddit. Within 12 hours, it hit 2 million views, and in none of them, none, did Elliot say a word. No apology, no denial, no control. For the first time, his silence didn't protect him. It exposed him. The first headline dropped 36 hours after the video went viral. Waitress claims billionaire is her father. Delusion or gold-digging plot. It came from a startup gossip blog funded, ironically, by one of Elliot's earliest angel investors. The accompanying image showed Clara mid-sentence, screen-grabbed from the blurry footage, her face slightly pixelated, and the caption cropped to twist her words. Elliot's PR firm worked overtime. Anonymous sources flooded social media threads, seeding doubt. She's been in and out of therapy for years. She changed her last name. She waited until he was in the room. Staged. In coordinated fashion, her character was reduced to hashtags. Clara, the climber. Delusional daughter. Restaurant rage. Clara saw all of it and said nothing. But the silence began to shift. At first it was subtle. A message request. No profile picture. Just 3 words. He did it. Then another. I was 19. Palo Alto. Then dozens. Emails, DMs, even a handwritten letter slipped under the restaurant service door. They came from women of all ages. Some had worked under Elliot at his early tech companies. Others had crossed paths at conferences, charity galas, and innovation retreats. The names didn't match. But the details did. Unwanted touches, late-night texts, threats hidden behind charm, silence bought or demanded. The patterns were undeniable. Clara printed every message. She kept them in a locked folder beneath her bed. She didn't respond. She didn't know how to, but she read every line. Slowly, twice. Each one confirmed something. She'd always felt, but never said aloud, it wasn't just about her. Meanwhile, Elliot was spiraling. Leah Braddock paced his glass-walled conference room as headlines multiplied. What does Elliot Vance have to hide? NDAs, money, and misconduct? Vance family secrets? I need a statement, she said through gritted teeth. Something warm, something human. You are losing the narrative. Elliot stood at the window, watching Manhattan blink beneath him. She's lying, he said. People don't believe silence anymore, Leah replied. Elliot turned. Then we speak louder. That night, Clara received another message. It wasn't from a victim. It was from a former intern. All it said was, check the assistant's laptop. She kept everything. By morning, the hashtag changed. No longer such Clara the climber. Now, Vance pattern, screenshots surfaced, old photos, blurred contracts, NDAs. The smear campaign was still running, but it was being drowned out. Elliot's empire, once built on silicon, money, and charm, was now leaking at every seam. And Clara, still nameless to the mainstream, still silent in the press, was watching it all unfold with quiet clarity. The world hadn't chosen her side, but it had begun to question his. The email was short. Subject, confidential inquiry from Lillian Beck, The Record. I believe you, and I think it's time the public does too. Clara read it twice, then deleted it. Lillian Beck had been reporting on powerful men for 2 decades. She'd broken the finance harassment case in 2017, the pharmaceutical CEO cover-up in 2019. She knew how to follow silence until it cracked. She found Clara the same way she found every story that mattered. Not through noise, but through patterns. Her voicemail followed next. I won't push, but if you're ready, I'm listening. Clara wasn't ready. Not until the night someone followed her home. It was subtle at first, footsteps too close behind her on a quiet block. A black car parked outside her apartment 3 nights in a row. The restaurant received a fake call claiming she had stolen money from a customer. One night, just after her shift, Clara walked 3 blocks, made a sharp turn, and saw the same man in a baseball cap cross behind her twice. She didn't wait. She ran. The next morning, she called the number from the email. Lillian Beck. It's me, Clara said. I'll talk. They met in a corner booth at a coffee shop in Brooklyn. Clara wore a hoodie, no makeup, and her sleeves pulled down over her hands. Lillian came with a notebook and calm eyes. I'm not here to speak for you, she said. Only to help you be heard. Clara hesitated. If I do this, he'll come after me harder. He already is, Lillian said softly, and now he's getting sloppy. Over 4 meetings, Clara laid it out. The NDA, the lawyer, the erased. Birth certificate. Her mother's silence. The online messages from other women, and the tip about the assistant's laptop. Lillian's face stayed neutral, but her pen never stopped moving. Then, she showed Clara what she had. Internal memos, board meeting transcripts, off-the-record interviews from former staffers. Clara stared in silence. This doesn't just cover up one mistake, Lillian said. It covers up a system. The article dropped 2 weeks later. Front page. The Daughter, the NDA, and the Billionaire Who Forgot Her, by Lillian Beck. It wasn't sensational. It was surgical. It quoted documents, interviews, Clara's words. It included a copy of the NDA, redacted but recognizable. It laid bare how image had been weaponized, how money had erased names, and how silence had been bought over and over again. The final paragraph ended with Clara's sentence from the restaurant. Did you think I wouldn't recognize my father? The fallout was immediate. Talk shows, threads, think pieces. A formal congressional inquiry into tech workplace abuse. But Clara didn't speak publicly. Not yet, because what mattered most was already said, and the world had finally listened. The headline had barely cooled before it was everywhere. The Daughter, the NDA, and the Billionaire Who Forgot Her. CNN, BBC, The Guardian, podcasts, YouTube breakdowns, side-by-side TikToks with slow zooms on Clara's face, captions pulled. From Lillian Beck's article, he left when I was 2. She didn't lie. Elliot's legal team issued a denial within hours. A formal press release typed in tight corporate language. Mr. Vance unequivocally denies all claims made in the referenced article. The allegations are malicious, misleading, and demonstrably false. On TV, a white-haired lawyer repeated the same line into every microphone. This is a character assassination attempt on a beloved innovator. But the voices online were louder and far more human. It started with a single post. Sarah J84. I was at Verite that night. I saw everything. She didn't raise her voice. He did. And the whole place froze. Then another. J. Langston. My wife and I were 2 tables over. We heard the sentence. Everyone heard it. We just didn't know what to do. And another. Menu Me NYC, a food critic. Verite was known for silence. Not that night. The silence had weight. And she carried it. Within 48 hours, a thread titled Table 12 Was Real had 20,000 shares. People began stitching together phone videos, timestamps, receipts, and whispered memories. Someone leaked the floor plan. Someone else posted a time-coded GIF of the moment Clara spoke. Elliot. Vance had all the money. But now, Clara had something harder to fight. Collective memory. Meanwhile, inside the very restaurant where it all began, Table 12 was empty. No one requested it anymore. Even VIP guests refused. Staff stopped assigning it altogether. It was polished each night, but remained untouched, like a shrine. Manager Miguel hung a small brass plaque near the side of the booth. No words. Just the number. 12. He never asked for permission. Elliot held a private board meeting the following Monday. 6 people in a glass conference room. He stood, jaw clenched, voice steady. This will blow over. But it didn't, because something had changed. It wasn't just the accusation, it was the stillness of it. The way everyone remembered stopping, forks midair, music fading, breaths held, not because of chaos, but because of clarity. 1. Tweet summarized it best. Alicia writes, "You can't control a room forever. Sometimes it freezes, and in that stillness, the truth echoes louder than a scream." Clara read that one twice. She didn't share it. She just saved it. A frozen room had become a living memory, and memories once seen don't fade, they sharpen. It arrived without warning, a secure digital envelope forwarded to the district. Attorney's cyber unit from an untraceable address. The metadata pointed back to an archived laptop, one that had belonged to Margot Greer, Elliot's former executive assistant, the woman who quietly left the company 6 years ago with a generous severance and a lifetime NDA. Inside the digital vault, hundreds of files, PDFs, audio memos, scans, of handwritten notes, and one folder labeled Settlements. Each file bore the same structure: a woman's name, a monetary sum, a legal signature. Some had notes in the margins. One simply read, "Do not let her speak, paid, monitored." Another, "Pregnancy terminated, paid in full." They were cold, clinical, but beneath the legalese, the implications burned. There were 27 women listed in total, dates spanning back 22 years. Every one of them signed away silence. Every one of them tied, directly or indirectly, to Elliot Vance. And now all 27 files were in the hands of the Manhattan DA's office. The media got wind within days. Whistleblower leak suggests pattern of abuse by tech mogul. NDA empire crumbling. Elliot Vance faces federal inquiry. The empire, once bulletproof, began to fracture from the inside. Board members distanced themselves. Vendors suspended contracts. The company's stock lost 9.3% in a single day. The real damage wasn't loud. It was institutional, systemic, measured in broken trust, not broken glass. Clara said nothing. She wasn't named in the leak. She wasn't contacted by police, and she didn't go on camera, despite hundreds of requests. She watched the collapse the same way she'd lived most of her life, quietly. Behind the door of her tiny apartment, eyes scanning headlines, ears trained to podcasts quoting lines she never said aloud, Detective Monroe reached out once, just once, a voicemail. "You don't have to testify, but if you ever want to, you'd change everything." She didn't reply. Not yet. Because for now, watching was enough. At Verite, Table 12 remained empty, the plaque untouched, and somewhere in the DA's office, An analyst pinned 27 printed names to a corkboard wall under one word: pattern. The vault had been opened, and this time it wasn't going to close. Not with signatures, not with money, and not with silence. The conference room was colder than she expected, not in temperature, in atmosphere. 2 federal attorneys, a notary, and a empty pitcher of water. And across from her, the woman leading the deposition, precise, composed, wire-rimmed glasses that caught the light just enough to obscure her eyes. Clara sat straight, hands folded, hair pulled back in a quiet bun. No makeup, no armor, just truth. "State your name for the record." Her voice didn't shake. "Clara Vale. And your relationship to the respondent, Mr. Elliot Vance?" She paused, not because she didn't know the answer, but because there were too many. Daughter, waitress, ghost, witness. She chose the one that mattered now. "I'm his daughter, eh?" Faint nod from the stenographer. Typing resumed. They walked her through the timeline. The dinner at Verite, the footage, the smear campaign, her mother's silence, the settlement she wasn't supposed to know about. At every question, she answered calmly without hesitation, no anger, no embellishment. And when they asked, "Do you believe Mr. Vance knew who you were?" she blinked once, then answered, "He knew who I was. He just didn't think I mattered." No one spoke for a full 5 seconds. It wasn't theatrical, it was heavy real. The room hadn't prepared for that kind of clarity. They expected emotion, maybe outrage. Instead, they got restraint, a kind of pain that had lived too long inside a body to come out screaming. It whispered now, and it echoed louder than shouting ever could. Outside the deposition room, her attorney placed a hand on Clara's shoulder. "You did fine." Clara didn't smile. She didn't cry, but her jaw relaxed. For the first time in weeks, she exhaled without shaking. Back in Elliot's world, one of glass towers, private jets, and invisible shields, panic was no longer strategic. It was existential. Shareholders wanted answers. Investigations multiplied. 2 former executives resigned. And inside Elliot's penthouse, his phone screen flashed the headline, "Clara Vale testifies. He knew, he just didn't care." He threw the phone against the wall. The screen shattered. But this time, the glass broke. Clara walked out of the building alone, wind against her collar, sky heavy with rain that hadn't yet started. She didn't look back, didn't check her phone, didn't speak to the reporters camped near the exit. She just walked away from the building, away from the lie, into the quiet, into herself. They sent the offer by courier, not email, not phone. A man in a black suit handed Clara a leather envelope outside her apartment building. No words exchanged. Just the weight of it in her palm, like guilt disguised in gold. She waited until he was gone before she opened it. Inside, a legal proposal with Elliot Vance's name stamped in embossed silver at the top. A multi-million-dollar settlement. Confidentiality clause reinstated, all interviews withdrawn, all connections erased again. She stared at it for a full hour, then tore it in half, and again, until it was confetti. Later that evening, she met with Lillian Beck, the journalist who had first believed her, and now sat across from her in a quiet Brooklyn cafe. "They offered you how much?" Lillian asked, blinking. "Enough to disappear," Clara said simply. "And you're not tempted?" Clara shook her head. "I was erased once. I'm not doing it again. Not for anyone. Not even for peace." The next week, Clara met with 2 other women, survivors of similar stories. Women who had been shut down, paid off, silenced. One of them, Rosa, had a son who didn't even know his father's name. "There are too many of us," Rosa whispered, "and no one listens unless there's a scandal." That's when Clara had the idea. Not revenge, not pity, legacy. She didn't want to destroy Elliot. That wasn't the point anymore. She wanted to make sure children born out of secrecy, of violence, cover-ups, and shame weren't made to feel like they were accidents. So she formed a foundation, a space for stories like hers. Legal help, therapy, scholarships. Quiet, powerful network for those born of NDAs and forced silences. She named it the Veil Project. At the launch event, Clara stood behind a podium, a modest microphone pinned to her collar. Cameras blinked, reporters scribbled. But her eyes found the front row, where Rosa sat with her son, now 10, looking up at Clara like she was someone who'd never flinched. "We weren't mistakes," Clara said, voice steady. "We were just inconvenient. So they paid to erase us." She paused. "But we're still here. We remember. And now we speak." The room stood in silence, then applause, not thunderous, but certain. Clara stepped down from the stage. Her phone buzzed once, a text from an unknown number. "You've made your point. Don't make it worse." She stared at the message, then deleted it, without fear, without hesitation.